Happy Monday, everybody. Today we're going to be reading pages 95 through 117 in our Wonder Books. I need you to go ahead and grab your book, open it up to page 95, and you should see After School. Are you ready to start? It's a lot of pages, so we got to be ready to read. Let's get started. I hear we're driving you home today. It was Miranda in 8th period. She had just sat down at the desk right behind me. I'd forgotten that Mom had called Miranda's mother the night before to ask if she could drive me home from school. Now remember, we're still in Via's perspective. You don't have to, I answered instinctively, casually. My mom can pick me up. I thought she had to pick Augie up or something. It turns out she can pick me up afterward. She just texted me, not a problem. Oh, okay. Thanks. It was all a lie on my part, but I couldn't see sitting in a car with the new Miranda. After school, I ducked into a restroom to avoid bumping into Miranda's mother outside. Half an hour later, I walked out of the school, ran the 3 blocks to the bus stop, hopped on the M86 to Central Park West, and took the subway home. Now, remember, she lives in New York City, so they take the subway and they take a lot of public transportation. Hey there, sweetie, Mom said the moment I stepped through the front door. How was your first day? I was starting to wonder where you guys were. We stopped for pizza. Incredible how easily a lie can slip through your lips. Is Miranda not with you? She seemed surprised that Miranda wasn't right behind me. She went straight home. We have a lot of homework. On your first day? Yes, on my first day, I yelled, which completely surprised Mom. But before she could say anything, I said, school was fine. It's really big, though. The kids seem nice. I wanted to give her enough information so she wouldn't feel the need to ask me more. How was Augie's first day of school? Mom hesitated, her eyebrows still high on her forehead from when I had snapped at her a second earlier. Okay, she said slowly, like she was letting out a breath. What do you mean, okay? I said, was it good or bad? He said it was good. So why do you think it wasn't good? I didn't say it wasn't good. Geez, Via, what's up with you? Just forgot I asked anything at all, I answered and stormed dramatically into Augie's room and slammed the door. He was on his PlayStation and didn't even look up. I hated how zombified his video games made him. So how was school? I said, scooching Daisy over so I could sit on his bed next to him. Fine, he answered, still not looking up from his game. Augie, I'm talking to you. I pulled the PlayStation out of his hands. Hey, he said angrily. How was school? I said fine, he yelled back, grabbing the PlayStation from me. Were people nice to you? Yes. No one was mean. He put the PlayStation down and looked at me as if I had asked the dumbest question in the world. Why would people be mean? He said. It was the first time in his life that I'd heard him be sarcastic like that. I didn't think he had it in him. The Padawan bites the dust. I'm not sure at what point that night Augie had cut off his Padawan braid or why that made me really mad. I had always found his obsession with everything Star Wars kind of geeky. And that braid in the back of his hair with its little beads was just awful. But he had always been so proud of it, of how long it took him to grow it out, or how he had chosen the beads himself in a craft store in Soho. He and Christopher, his best friend, used to play with lightsabers and Star Wars stuff whenever they got together, and they had both started growing their braids at the same time. When Augie cut his braid off that night without an explanation, without telling me beforehand, which was surprising, or even calling Christopher, I was just so upset I can't even explain why. I've seen Augie brushing his hair in the bathroom mirror. He meticulously tries to get every hair in place. He tilts his head to look at himself from different angles, like there's some magic perspective inside the mirror that could change the dimensions of his face. Mom knocked on my door after dinner. She looked drained, and I realized that between me and Augie, today had been a tough day for her too. So, you want to tell me what's up? She asked nicely, softly. Not now, okay? I answered. I was reading. I was tired. Maybe later I'd be up to telling her about Miranda, but not now. I'll check in before you go to bed, she said, and then she came over and kissed me on top of my head. Can Daisy sleep with me tonight? Sure, I'll bring her in later. Don't forget to come back, I said as she left. I promise. But she didn't come back that night. Dad did. He told me Augie had had a bad first day and Mom was helping him through it. He asked me how my day had gone, and I told him fine. He said he didn't believe me for a second, and I told him Miranda and Ella were acting like jerks. I didn't mention how I took the subway home by myself, though. He said nothing tests friendship like high school, and then proceeded to poke fun at the fact that I was reading War and Peace. Not real fun, of course, since I had heard him brag to people that he had a 15-year-old who is reading Tolstoy. I don't know if that's right. Tolstoy? That's what I'm going with. But he liked to rib me about where I was in the book, in a war part or a peace part, and if there was anything in there about Napoleon's days as a hip-hop dancer. It was silly stuff, but Dad always managed to make everyone laugh. And sometimes that's all you needed to feel better. Don't be mad at Mom, he said as he bent down to give me a goodnight kiss. You know how much she worries about Augie. I know, I acknowledged. Want the lights on or off? It's getting kind of late, he said, pausing by the light switch at the door. Can you bring Daisy first? 2 seconds later, he came back with Daisy dangling in his arms, and he laid her down next to me on the bed. Good night, sweetheart, he said, kissing my forehead. He kissed Daisy on her forehead, too. Good night, girlie. Sweet dreams. An apparition at the door. Once I got up in the middle of the night because I was thirsty, and I saw Mom standing outside Augie's room. Her hand was on the doorknob, her forehead leaning on the door, which was ajar. She wasn't going in his room or stepping out, just standing right outside the door, as if she is listening to the sound of his breathing as he sleeps. The hallway lights were out. The only thing illuminating her was the blue nightlight in Augie's bedroom, in August's bedroom. She looked ghost-like standing there, or maybe I should say angelic. I tried to walk back into my room without disturbing her, but she heard me and walked over to me. Is Augie okay? I asked. I knew that sometimes he would wake up choking on his own saliva if he accidentally turned over on his back. Oh, he's fine, she said, wrapping her arms around me. She walked me back into my room, pulled the covers over me, and kissed me goodnight. She never explained what she was doing outside his door, and I never asked. I wonder how many nights she stood outside his door, and I wonder if she's ever stood outside my door like that. Breakfast. Can you pick me up from school today? I said the next morning, smearing some cream cheese on my bagel. Mom was making August lunch, American cheese on whole wheat bread, soft enough for Augie to eat. While August sat eating oatmeal at the table. Dad was getting ready to go to work. Now that I was in high school, the new school routine was going to be that Dad and I would take the subway together in the morning, which meant his having to leave 15 minutes earlier than usual. Then I'd get off at my stop and he'd keep going. And Mom was going to pick me up after school in the car. I was going to call Miranda's mother to see if she could drive you home again. Mom answered. No, Mom, I said quickly. You pick me up, or I'll just take the subway. You know I don't want you to take the subway by yourself yet, she answered. Mom, I'm 15. Everybody my age takes the subway by themselves. She can take the subway home, said Dad from the other room, adjusting his tie as he stepped into the kitchen. Why can't Miranda's mother just pick her up again? Mom argued with him. She's old enough to take the subway by herself, Dad insisted. Mom looked at both of us. Is something going on? She didn't address her question to either one of us in particular. You would know if you had come back to check on me, I said spitefully, like you said you would. Reason I said like that is because it's in italics, so I know to read it with some extra pizzazz, like you said you would. Oh, God, Via, said Mom, remembering now how she had completely ditched me last night. She put down the knife she was using to cut Augie's grapes in half. Still a choking hazard for him because of the size of his palate. I'm so sorry. I fell asleep in Augie's room. By the time I woke up, I know. I nodded indifferently. Mom came over, put her hands on my cheeks, and lifted my face to look at her. I'm really, really sorry, she whispered. I could tell she was. It's okay, I said. Via, Mom, it's fine. This time I meant it. She looked so genuinely sorry, I just wanted to let her off the hook. She kissed and hugged me, then returned to the grapes. So, is something going on with Miranda? She asked. Just that she's acting like a complete jerk. I said. Miranda's not a jerk, August quickly chimed in. She can be, I yelled. Believe me. Okay, then, I'll pick you up, no problem, Mom said decisively, sweeping the half grapes into a snack bag with the side of her knife. That was the plan all along anyway. I'll pick Augie up from school in the car and then we'll pick you up. We'll probably get there about 3:45. No, I said firmly before she'd even finished. Isabel, she can take the subway, said Dad impatiently. She's a big girl now. She's reading War and Peace for crying out loud. What does War and Peace have to do with anything? Answered Mom, clearly annoyed. It means you don't have to pick her up in the car like she's a little girl, he said sternly. Via, are you ready? Get your bags and let's go. I'm ready, I said, pulling on my backpack. Bye, Mom. Bye, Augie. I kissed them both quickly and headed towards the door. Do you even have a Metro card? Mom said after me. Of course she has a Metro card, answered Dad, fully exasperated. Exasperated means really tired. Yeesh, Mama, stop worrying so much. Bye, he said, kissing her on the cheek. Bye, big boy, he said to August, kissing him on top of the head. I'm proud of you. Have a good night. Have a good day. Bye, Daddy. You too. Dad and I jogged down the stoop stairs and headed down the block. A stoop is like a porch in a big city. Like it has the long, narrow steps that are really tall, and the houses are usually really skinny and on top of each other. That's what a stoop is. Call me after school before you get on the subway, Mom yelled at me from the window. I didn't even turn around, but waved my hand at her so that she'd know I heard her. Dad did turn around, walking backwards for a few steps. War and peace, Isabel, he called out, smiling as he pointed at me. War and peace. Genetics 101. Both sides of Dad's family were Jews from Russia and Poland. Papa's grandparents fled the pogroms and ended up in NYC, so New York City, at the turn of the century. Tata's parents fled the Nazis and ended up in Argentina in the 40s. Papa and Tata met at a dance on the Lower East Side while she was in town visiting a cousin. They got married, moved to Bayside, and had Dad and Uncle Ben. Mom's side of the family is from Brazil, except for her mother, my beautiful grands, and her dad, Augusto, who died before I was born, and the rest of Mom's family, all the glamorous aunts, uncles, and cousins, still live in Alto Leban, a ritzy suburb south of Rio. Grands and Augusto moved to Boston in the early 60s and had Mom and Aunt Kate, who's married to Uncle Porter. Mom and Dad met at Brown University and have been together ever since. Isabel and Nate, like two peas in a pod. Isabel and Nate are her parents' names. They moved to New York right after college, had me a few years later, then moved to a brick townhouse in North River Heights, the hippie stroller capital of Upper Manhattan, when I was about a year old. Not one person in the exotic mix of my family gene pool has ever shown any obvious signs of having what August has. I've pored over grainy sepia pictures of long dead relatives in babushkas, black and white snapshots of distant cousins in crisp white linen suits, soldiers in uniforms, ladies with beehive hairdos, Polaroids of bell-bottom teenagers and long-haired hippies, and not once have I been able to detect the slightest trace of August's face in their faces. Not a one. So she's going through all her ancestors' pictures. But after August was born, my parents underwent genetic counseling. They were told that August had what seemed to be a previously known type of mandibulofacial dysostis. Okay, so we're going to go with mandibulofacial dysostis. I might have butchered that, but that's what we're going with. Caused by an autosomal recessive mutation in the TCOF1 gene, which is located on chromosome 5, complicated by hemifacial macrosoma characteristic of OAV spectrum. Sometimes these mutations occur during pregnancy. Sometimes they're inherited from one parent carrying the dominant gene. Sometimes they're caused by the interaction of many genes, possible in the combination with environmental factors. This is called multifactorial inheritance. In August's case, the doctors were able to identify one of the single nucleotide deletion mutations that made war on his face. The weird thing is, though, you'd never know it from looking at them. Both my parents carry that mutant gene, and I carry it too. Okay, so a gene is something that you're born with. So whenever your parents had you, they had certain genes, and that's why you look the way that you do. So there's a gene in mom and there's a gene in dad, and when they created Augie, those genes mixed together, and that's the reason that he's the way he is. And according to Via, she carries it too. So you know that she has to kind of worry when she has kids, will they have the same disease as Augie? So that's what she's talking about, how she's went through all the family line and she's never found anybody like Augie. But when they went to a doctor that looked at their genes, they found where it was in both mom and dad's genes. The Punnett square, that's how you determine genes. Whenever you get in high school, we had to make Punnett squares, and that's how we knew, hey, the baby's going to have blue eyes or going to have brown eyes based on what the parent looks like. The Punnett square. If I have children, there's a 1 in 2 chance that I will pass on the defective gene to them. That doesn't mean they'll look like August, but they'll carry that gene that got double dosed in August and help make him the way he is. If I marry someone who has the same defective gene, there's a 1 in 2 chance that our kids will carry the gene and look totally normal, a 1 in 4 chance that our kids will not carry the gene at all, and a 1 in 4 chance that our kids will look like August. So there's a 25% chance that she could have a kid that looks like Augie. If August has children with someone who doesn't have a trace of the gene, there's a 100% probability that their kids will inherit the gene, but a 0% chance that their kids will have a double dose of it like August, which means they'll carry the gene no matter what, but they could look totally normal. If you marry someone who has the gene, their kids will have the same odds as my kids. This only explains the part of August that's explainable. There's that other part of his genetic makeup that's not inherited, but just incredibly bad luck. Countless doctors have drained little tic-tac-toe grids for my parents over the years to try to explain the genetic lottery to them. Genetics use these Punnett squares to determine inheritance, recessive and dominant genes, probabilities, and chance. So there's 2 types of genes. There's dominant genes and there's recessive genes. Dominant genes mean your kids are going to get that no matter what. Recessive, you have to have 2 recessive in order for it to be able to be dominant. But for all they know, there's more they don't know. They can try to forecast the odds, but they can't guarantee them. They use terms like germline mosaicism and chromosomal rearrangement or delay mutation to explain why the scientist is not an exact science. I actually like how doctors talk. I like the sound of science. I like how words you don't understand explain things you can't understand. There are countless people under words like germline mosaicism, chromosomal rearrangement, or delay mutation. Countless babies who will never be born like mine. Out with the old. Miranda and Ella blasted off. They attached themselves to a new crowd destined for high school glory. After a week of painful lunches where all they could do was talk about people that didn't interest me, I decided to make a clean break for it. They asked no questions. I told no lies. We just went our separate ways. Okay, so instead of talking about how Augie looks the way he looks, now we're talking about Miranda and some of Via's high school experiences. So she's saying that she just parted ways with Miranda and Ella. I didn't mind after a while. I stopped going to lunch for about a week, though, to make the transition easier, to avoid the fake, oh shoot, there's no room for you at the table, Olivia. It was easier just to go to the library and read. I finished War and Peace in October. It was amazing. People think it's such a hard read, but it's really just a soap opera with lots of characters, people falling in love, fighting for love, dying for love. I want to be in love like that someday. I want my husband to love me the way Prince Andrea loves Natasha. I ended up hanging out with a girl named Eleanor who I'd known for my days at PS22. PS22 is an elementary school, though we had never gone to different middle schools. Eleanor had always been a really smart girl, a little bit of a crybaby back then, but nice. I never realized how funny she was. Not laugh out loud dad funny, but full of great quips. And she never knew how lighthearted I could be. Eleanor, I guess, I had always been under the impression that I was very serious. And it turns out she had never liked Miranda and Ella. She thought they were stuck up. I gained entry through Eleanor's to the smart kids table at lunch. It was a larger group than I had been accustomed to hanging out with, and a more diverse crowd. Remember how we talked about biodiversity means there's a lot of different types of animals, and how I said diversity means a lot of different types of people? Well, she's saying that this is a group of people that a lot of them look different and they're into different things. It included Eleanor's boyfriend, Kevin, who would definitely become class president someday, a few techie guys, girls like Eleanor who were members of the yearbook committee and the debate club, and a quiet guy named Justin who had small round glasses and played the violin and who I had an instant crush on. When I'd seen Miranda and Ella, who were now hanging out with the super popular set, we'd say, "Hey, what's up?" and move on. Occasionally, Miranda would ask me how August was doing, and then she would say, "Tell him I said hello." This I never did. Not to spite Miranda, but because August was in his own world these days. There were times at home that we'd never cross paths. October 31st. What day is October 31st? Halloween. And we already know what happened on Halloween in Augie's perspective. Now let's see what happened on Halloween in Via's perspective. Grands had died the night before Halloween. Since then, even though it's been 4 years, this has always been a sad time of the year for me. For Mom, too, though she doesn't always say it. Instead, she immerses herself in getting August costumes ready, since we all know Halloween is his favorite time of year. This year was no different. August really wanted to be a Star Wars character called Boba Fett, so Mom looked for a Boba Fett costume in August size, which strangely enough was out of stock everywhere. She went to every online store, found a few on eBay that were going for an outrageous amount, and finally ended up buying a Jango Fett costume, and then she converted it into a Boba Fett costume by painting it green. I would say in all, she must have spent 2 weeks working on that stupid costume. And no, I won't mention the fact that Mom had never made any of my costumes, because it really has no bearing on anything at all. The morning of Halloween, I woke up thinking about Grands, which made me really sad and weepy. Dad kept telling me to hurry up and get dressed, which just stressed me out even more, and suddenly I started crying. I just wanted to stay home. So Dad took August to school that morning, and Mom said I could stay home, and the two of us cried together for a while. One thing I know for sure, however much I miss Grands, Mom must have missed her more. All those times August was clinging to life after surgery, all those rushed trips to the ER, Grands had always been there for Mom. It felt good to cry with Mom. For both of us. At some point, Mom had the idea of watching The Ghost and Mrs. Murr together, which is one of our all-time favorite black and white movies. I agree that was a great idea. I think I probably would have used this weeping session as an opportunity to tell Mom everything that was going on at school with Miranda and Ella. But just as we were sitting down in front of the DVD player, the phone rang. It was the nurse from August's school calling to tell Mom that August had a stomachache and should be picked up. So much for the old movies and the mother-daughter bonding. Mom picked August up, and the moment he came home, he went straight to the bathroom and threw up. Then he went to his bed and pulled the covers over his head. Mom took his temperature, brought him some hot tea, and assumed the August mom role again. Via's mom, who had come out for a little while, was put away. I understood, though, August was in bad shape. Neither one of us asked why he had worn his bleeding screen costume to school instead of his Boba Fett costume Mom had made for him. If it annoyed Mom to see the costume she had worked on for 2 weeks tossed on the floor, unused, she didn't show it. Trick or treat. August said he wasn't feeling well enough to go trick-or-treating later in the afternoon, which was sad for him because I know how much he loved to trick-or-treat, especially after it got dark outside. Even though I was well beyond the trick-or-treating stage myself, I usually threw on some mask or other to accompany him up and down the blocks, watching him knocking on people's doors, giddy with excitement. I knew it was the one night a year when he could truly be like every other kid. No one knew he was different under the mask. To August, that must have felt absolutely amazing. At 7 o'clock that night, I knocked on his door. "Hey," I said. "Hey," he said back. He wasn't using his PlayStation or reading a comic book. He was just lying in his bed looking at the ceiling. Daisy, as always, was next to him on the bed, her head draped over his legs. The bleeding screen costume was crumpled up on the floor next to the Boba Fett costume. How's your stomach? I said, sitting next to him on the bed. I'm still nauseous. You're sure you're not up for the Halloween parade? Positive. That surprised me. Usually, August was such a trooper about his medical issues, whether it was skateboarding a few days after a surgery or sipping food through a straw when his mouth was practically bolted shut. This was a kid who's gotten more shots, taken more medicines, put up with more procedures by the age of 10 than most people would have to put up with in 10 lifetimes. And he was sidelined from a little nausea? You want to tell me what's up? I said, sounding a bit like Mom. No. Is it school? Yes. Teachers, schoolwork, friends. He didn't answer. Did someone say something? I asked. People always say something, he answered bitterly. I could tell he was close to crying. Tell me what happened, I said. And he told me what happened. He had overheard some very mean things some boy was saying about him. He didn't care about what the other boys had said. He expected that. But he was hurt that one of the boys was his best friend, Jack Will. I remembered his mentioning Jack a couple times over the past few months. I remembered Mom and Dad saying he seemed like a really nice kid, saying they were glad August had already made a friend like that. Sometimes kids are stupid, I said softly, holding his hand. I'm sure he didn't mean it. Then why would he say it? He's just pretending to be my friend all along? Tushman probably bribed him with good grades or something. I bet you he was like, hey, Jack, if you make friends with this freak, you don't have to take any tests this year. You know that's not true, and don't call yourself a freak. Whatever. I wish I'd never gone to school in the first place. But I thought you were liking it. I hate it. He was angry all of a sudden, punching his pillow. I hate it, I hate it, I hate it. He was shrieking at the top of his lungs. I didn't say anything. I didn't know what to say. He was hurt. He was mad. I let him have a few more minutes of his fury. Daisy started licking the tears off of his face. Come on, Augie, I said, patting his back gently. Why don't you put on your Jango Fett costume and... It's a Boba Fett costume. Why does everyone mix that up? Boba Fett costume, I said, trying to stay calm. I put my arm around his shoulders. Let's just go to the parade, okay? If I go to the parade, Mom will think I'm feeling better and make me go to school tomorrow. Mom would never make you go to school, I answered. Come on, Augie, let's just go. It'll be fun, I promise. And I'll let you have all my candy. He didn't argue. He got out of bed and slowly started putting on his Boba Fett costume. I helped him adjust the straps and tighten the belt, and by the time he put his helmet on, I could tell he was feeling better. Time to think. August played up the stomachache the next day so he wouldn't have to go to school. I admit, I feel a little bad for Mom, who was genuinely concerned that he had a stomach bug, but I had promised August that I wouldn't tell her about the incident at school. By Sunday, he was still determined not to go back to school. What are you planning on telling Mom and Dad? I asked him when he told me this. They said I could quit whenever I wanted to. He said this while he was still focusing on a comic book he was reading. But you've never been the kind of kid who quits, I said, truthfully. That's not like you. I'm quitting. You're going to have to tell Mom and Dad why, I pointed out, putting the comic book on his hand so he'd have to look up at me while we were talking. Then Mom will call the school and everybody will know about it. Will Jack get in trouble? I would think so. Good. I have to admit, August was surprising me more and more. He pulled another comic book off the shelf and started leafing through it. Augie, I said, are you really going to let a couple of stupid kids keep you from going back to school? I know you've been enjoying it. Don't give them that power over you. Don't give them that satisfaction. They have no idea I even heard them, he explained. No, I know, but Via, it's okay. I know what I'm doing. I've made up my mind. But this is crazy, Augie, I said empathetically. We talked about empathy, how you feel bad for someone. Pulling the new comic book away from him, too. You'll have to go back to school. Everybody hates school sometimes. I hate school sometimes. I hate my friends sometimes. That's just life, Augie. You want to be treated normal, right? This is normal. We all have to go to school sometimes, despite the fact that we have bad days, okay? Do people go out of their way to avoid touching you, Via? He answered, which left me momentarily without an answer. Yeah, right. That's what I thought. So don't compare your bad days at school to mine, okay? Okay, that's fair, I said. But it's not a contest about whose days suck the most, Augie. The point is, we all have to put up with the bad days. Now, unless you want to be treated like a baby the rest of your life or like a kid with special needs, you have to just suck it up and go. He didn't say anything, but I think that last bit was getting to him. You don't have to say a word to those kids, I continued. August, actually, it's so cool that you know what they said, but they don't know that you know what they said. You know? What the heck? You know what I mean. You don't have to talk to them ever again if you don't want. And they'll never know why. See? Or you can pretend to be friends with them, but deep down inside, you're not. Is that how you are with Miranda? He asked. No, I answered quickly, defensively. I've never faked my feelings with Miranda. So why are you saying that I should? I'm not. I'm just saying you shouldn't let those little jerks get to you, that's all. Like Miranda got to you. Why do you keep bringing Miranda up? I yelled impatiently. I'm trying to talk to you about your friends. Please keep mine out of it. You're not even friends with her anymore. What does that have to do with what we're talking about? The way August was looking at me reminded me of a doll's face. He just stared at me blankly with his half-closed doll eyes. She called the other day, he said finally. What? I was stunned. And you didn't tell me? She wasn't calling you, he answered, pulling both comic books out of my hands. She was calling me, just to say hi, to see how I was doing. She didn't even know I was going to real school now. Can't believe you hadn't told her. She said the two of you don't hang out as much anymore, but she wanted me to know she'd always loved me like a big sister. Double stunned, stung, flabbergasted. No words formed in my mouth. Why didn't you tell me? I said finally. I don't know, he shrugged, opening the first comic book again. Well, I'm telling Mom and Dad about Jack Will if you stop going to school, I answered. Tushman will probably call you into school and make Jack and those other kids apologize to you in front of everyone, and everyone will treat you like a kid who shouldn't be going to school for kids who should be going to school for kids with special needs. Is that what you want? Because that's what's going to happen. Otherwise, just go back to school and act like nothing happened. Or if you want to confront Jack about it, fine. But either way, if you fine, he interrupted. What? Fine, I'll go, he yelled, not loudly. Just stop talking about it already. Can I just read my book now? Fine, I answered, turning to leave his room. I thought of something. Did Miranda say anything else about me? He looked up from the comic book and looked right into my eyes. She said to tell you she misses you, quote, unquote. I nodded. Thanks, I said casually, too embarrassed to let him see how happy that made me feel. And that is the end of Via's perspective. Through Via's eyes, we were able to see what it's like to have a brother with those kinds of special needs. We learned that, sometimes she gets pushed to the side. So it was really nice getting into her brain and seeing her perspective. Remember, we're still in a first-person point of view, but we're in Via's perspective. Now I want you to answer a couple questions about your reading.